Theresa Caputo, a Long Island medium, just got a beautiful house from her new husband. Theresa was very happy to get her new house. But the husband made one condition. Theresa could never have children from her first marriage in this house. When Theresa heard this condition, she felt very upset. She knew she couldn't meet this condition, though. Theresa Caputo has always believed in signs. For decades, as the Long Island medium, she helped people talk to loved ones who had died and sent them messages of comfort and healing. But this time, it felt like life was sending her a message that she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. On a warm fall afternoon, her new husband Anthony gave her a small silver key tied with a ribbon. His eyes sparkled with excitement, and his smile was big. He said, "This is for you, Theresa." For us. They drove to Long Island's North Shore, where the trees swayed slowly in the cool ocean breeze. Theresa's heart almost stopped when they got there. In front of her was a beautiful white colonial-style house with black shutters, big porches, and a garden that looked like it came from a magazine about how to live. There was a faint smell of fresh paint and lavender inside. Sunlight came in through the tall windows and bounced off the shiny wood floors. The kitchen was huge. Theresa could already see herself hosting Sunday dinners there, with laughter, clinking glasses, and her famous pasta sauce cooking on the stove. Her eyes were full of tears as she turned to Anthony. "It's so pretty. I can't believe you did this." He held her close. "You deserve it. It's time for you to have something just for you after all you've done for others." They moved from room to room for the rest of the day, like kids looking for a secret place to hide. Theresa thought about how to make each room feel warm and loving. She thought about where to put the family pictures, where to put her reading room, and how great it would be to fill the house with voices, especially the voices of her children Victoria and Larry Jr. from her first marriage. But later that night, when the sunset's golden light filled the living room, Anthony's tone changed. He leaned against the doorframe, unsure. "There's one thing, Theresa," he said slowly. She looked up, interested. "What is that?" He took a big breath. "I want this to be our space. A new beginning. In other words, I'd rather not have your kids from your first marriage live here. Of course, you can visit, but not for long. I just want this house to be ours." At first, Theresa thought she had heard wrong. She laughed softly, thinking he would smile and say he was just kidding. But his face stayed serious. All of a sudden, the room got colder. The wall clock's ticking was very quiet, and each second felt heavy and slow. "Anthony," she said softly, "my kids are a part of me. They always will be. This isn't just my home. It's my life. You want me to pick between them and this house?" Anthony walked closer to try to make his words sound softer. "I'm not saying they can't come over. I just want to set limits. We're making something new here." Theresa's chest felt tight. She had spent years helping families heal from separation and loss and bringing them closer together. She felt like an invisible wall was being built inside her own life in the middle of this dream house. She lay in the guest bedroom that night, looking up at the ceiling. She remembered Victoria's bright laugh, Larry Jr.'s quick wit, and how they still called her Ma no matter how old they got. She imagined them in this house, eating in the kitchen, relaxing on the porch, and filling the halls with the same love she had dreamed about all day. And now, that vision seemed wrong. Theresa tried to put the thought out of her mind for the next few days. She kept herself busy by unpacking boxes, hanging curtains, and arranging flowers in the dining room. But every time she put a picture of the family on a shelf, Anthony would look at it with a look she couldn't quite understand. Finally, one night she sat him down at the long table in the farmhouse. There was only one candle flickering between them, which was the only light. "Anthony," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion, "I can't live in a house where my kids aren't welcome as much as they want to be. A house without them would never feel like home to me." He stared at her for a long time, and his jaw got tight. "So, what are you trying to say?" She said softly, "I love you, but I can't agree to a condition that leaves out the people who are a part of my soul." No one said anything. The wind rustled the trees outside, and it felt like the world was holding its breath. In the end, it wasn't an easy choice. Love isn't often. But Theresa knew that no matter how pretty the walls and windows of a house were, they could never take the place of the open doors of a heart that really wanted to be with family. As she walked away from the table that night, she touched the cool railing of the stairs and felt a strange sadness. The house was beautiful, yes, but sometimes even the most beautiful homes can feel empty when they are built on conditions instead of love. But it was a cool fall afternoon in New York City. The air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts from street vendors, and the golden leaves swirled around the feet of people who were busy. Kelsey Grammer, an Emmy-winning actor known for his strong presence on screen, quietly walked into a private hotel room in Manhattan. He wasn't there for an interview or a photo shoot. This was something very personal. Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, was waiting inside. Her long, perfectly styled blonde hair and long, perfect nails were just like they always were. She also had that warm but slightly mischievous smile that she always had. Kelsey had agreed to meet her for a private reading, which he had kept a secret from almost everyone he knew. "Hey, Kelsey. Wow, you look just like you do on TV." Theresa said hello, and her thick Long Island accent broke the tension. Come in, get comfortable. I just want to tell you how I do my job. As a medium, I talk to the spirits of people who have died and tell you what I see, hear, and feel. Just take it with you if it doesn't make sense right now." Kelsey chuckled softly, but his eyes showed a hint of weakness. "I'm open," he said, "but I have to admit I'm a little skeptical." Theresa said, "That's fine. The dead don't care if you don't believe. They'll talk no matter what." Theresa closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath as they sat across from each other. She suddenly looked up sharply. "Kelsey, I see a male figure coming through. He has a strong presence and is older like a father. He keeps saying regret over and over again, and he says he died suddenly." Kelsey's jaw got tight. He didn't answer right away. "He shows me a picture of you as a young man, lost and almost searching," Theresa said. "And he has a fishing pole in his hand. Did someone you know used to go fishing with you?" Kelsey's eyes started to fill with tears. He said softly, "That's my father. When I was a kid, we used to fish together. That was before he was killed." Theresa's face relaxed. "Oh, honey, he's coming forward to say that he's been with you all this time. He says he's proud of the man you've become, even though life has given you more pain than most people can handle. He is showing me the number 7. "What does that have to do with it?" Kelsey gulped. 7. That's how old I was when my little sister was born. She was killed when she was still a teenager." Theresa reached over the table and touched his hand gently. "She's here too, honey. She is behind your dad. She says, 'Tell him I'm fine.' She is showing me a bright blue dress and twirling in it. Did she love going to a dance or something?" Kelsey had a tear on her cheek. She loved to dance. She would put on her dresses and spin in front of the mirror. Theresa smiled gently. "She says she still dances. She says, 'Tell Kelsey to stop carrying my death as a weight. It's not your fault.' She shows me a light and steps into it with your father, but they're still here, watching you." Kelsey wiped his eyes and spoke softly. "I've been through so much pain. It's been hard for me to lose my father, sister, and half-brothers." Theresa nodded. "But you kept going anyway. Your family in spirit says that you have always been their voice here. They thank you for keeping their memory alive. And your dad, who I could see putting his hand on your shoulder, says, 'Tell him I'm proud. Tell him he's done enough.'" There was a quiet in the room that felt almost holy. Theresa leaned closer. "Kelsey, they want you to know that you're not alone when you go on stage. They're always watching you perform from the wings. That's why you sometimes feel a sudden warmth or calm before a scene." Kelsey smiled through her tears as she looked down. "That makes a lot of sense." Theresa sat back and let the moment sink in. "Before we finish, your sister just told me something funny. She told me to tell him that I still think he's bossy." Kelsey shook his head and laughed for the first time that afternoon. "That sounds like her." Kelsey stood up and hugged Theresa when the session was over. He said, "I didn't think this would hit me so hard." Theresa, who was always warm but matter-of-fact, said, That's the thing about Spirit. They know exactly what you need to hear, even when you don't know it yourself. Kelsey, you are loved. Keep that in mind. When Kelsey stepped back into the busy streets of Manhattan, the cool air felt different, like it was lighter. There was still sadness, but there was also a quiet comfort, as if his father and sister were really walking with him somewhere out of sight. And for the first time in a long time, Kelsey Grammer felt a little less alone. But the small banquet hall in Hicksville, New York, was filled with the soft hum of people talking. There were neat rows of folding chairs, a table at the back with coffee, tea, and cookies, and a faint smell of lilacs coming in through the open windows. Tonight was one of Theresa Caputo's rare group readings in her hometown. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers came together to hear messages from the other side. But there was someone in the crowd who had never been to one of her events before, at least not as a believer. Nicholas Caputo is her father. Theresa's dad had always been there for her in his own quiet way. He was the kind of man who believed in hard work, what you could touch, and what you could see. He had seen tragedy as a retired firefighter, but he liked to think that life was all about the present. He would often say, "When you're gone, you're gone." For years, he had politely nodded and smiled skeptically while Theresa talked about her readings. Theresa's stomach fluttered when she saw him slip into the back row with his usual Yankees cap on and his arms crossed like he was guarding a vault. He didn't say he was coming. "Dad," she said with a smile, trying to hide her shock. "Didn't think I'd run into you here tonight." "I'm just here to watch," he said, raising his chin. "Don't think you can change my mind." The night started out like usual. Theresa walked around the room, stopping when she felt Spirit pull her. As Theresa talked about how her late husband would hide love notes in her coat pockets, a woman in the front row cried. When Theresa talked about the blue guitar pick that his brother gave him and that he kept in his wallet, a man near the middle nodded with tears in his eyes. But Theresa stopped in the middle. She felt a wave of energy wash over her, stronger than usual. She turned slowly and looked at the back row, where her father was sitting. He said under his breath, "Oh, come on," as if he already knew what was going to happen. Theresa's voice got softer. "Hey, Dad, someone is here for you." The room was quiet. It felt like the air was holding its breath. "You've got a gentleman in Spirit, older, stocky build, strong hands. He says he knows you've been doubting this, but he doesn't want to argue. He just wants you to know that he is proud of the man you have become." Nicholas blinked but didn't say anything. Theresa went on. "He's calling me Anthony and showing me a gold pocket watch. He says you used to play cards with him on Sundays." Her father's jaw clenched. Anthony's father, Theresa's grandfather, had been dead for more than 30 years. Nicholas had kept the gold pocket watch in his dresser ever since. No one outside of the family knew about the card games on Sunday. Theresa moved closer, her voice shaky but steady. "Tell my boy I was wrong about how I left things," he says. She tilted her head to listen. "He says you were right that he should have said goodbye. He says you earned that." Nicholas's eyes were bright with tears that hadn't fallen yet. He remembered the day his father died, how they had fought the week before, and how he would never hear his father's voice again. Theresa put her hand on her dad's shoulder with care.
"He's here, Dad."
"He has always been here. You didn't want to believe it because you were afraid it would hurt more." Her father swallowed hard and looked at her in a new way.
He said softly,
I can feel him," and the words sounded strange coming from him. The audience was quiet, and some of them were wiping their own tears. Nicholas didn't cross his arms once for the rest of the night. He watched his daughter with a soft look on his face and shook his head every now and then, not in disbelief, but in awe. Nicholas stayed near the back after the reading was over, and people started to leave. Theresa walked up to him nervously.
"Well?" she asked.
He smiled a little, lifting one side of his mouth. "You got me, kid. I don't know how you do it, but I know it's true. Your grandpa was here tonight. I could feel it." Theresa's eyes filled with tears. She had read for famous people, strangers, and families who were sad, but tonight she had given her own father something she never thought she could. Faith. Nicholas put an arm around his daughter's shoulder as they walked out into the cool night air. "Please save me a seat next time you do one of these." He winked and said, "But maybe not all the way in the back." For the first time in years, Theresa felt like her gift had brought her full circle, back to her own family and her own heart. And somewhere, just beyond the veil, her grandfather Anthony was also smiling. But Mark Reynolds had never believed in anything that he couldn't see, measure, or explain in a logical way. He was 52 years old and worked as an accountant in New Jersey. He was a man who lived by numbers and facts. He was the type of person who read every contract's fine print and checked the locks 3 times before going to bed. Ghosts? Spirits? Life after death? Mark thought those were bedtime stories that people told themselves to feel better about the things they didn't know. When his sister Emily dragged him to a live event with Theresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, he made it clear that he was only going because she wouldn't stop bugging him. He said to Em in the car, "Look, this is just for fun, okay? It feels like a magic show. Fun but fake," Emily said with a smile. "We'll see." There were hundreds of people at the venue. Mark didn't feel like he was at a spiritual event. Instead, he felt like he was at a casual community event with people laughing and talking, and the smell of coffee coming from the concession stand. Theresa walked out in her trademark high heels and big blonde hair, looking like she owned the room. Her warm Long Island accent made everyone feel like they were just old friends catching up right away. Mark crossed his arms and waited for the show to start. Theresa began to walk through the crowd, talking about the messages she was getting from spirits. She talked about specific things like a father who died of a heart attack, a grandmother who wore a strong perfume, and a brother who got a tattoo in memory of someone. People gasped, cried, and nodded. Mark rolled his eyes at every reaction, sure that there was some way she was trying to get information. Then, out of nowhere, Theresa stopped in her tracks. She turned slowly, looking around at the people in the crowd, and her eyes fell on Mark. "Sir, right there in the navy sweater, can I come to you?" Mark turned around, sure she was talking to someone else. But her finger was right at him. Yeah," he said awkwardly, already feeling the heat in his cheeks. Theresa came closer. "Someone is coming up to you. Feels like a father figure, like your dad or grandpa. It feels like he's putting pressure on my chest, like this is heart-related. Does that make sense?" Mark stopped moving. 6 years ago, his father died suddenly from a huge heart attack. But he didn't say anything because he thought it might still be a lucky guess. "Maybe," he said under his breath. Theresa turned her head. "He told me you didn't get to say goodbye and that you've been feeling guilty about something you didn't say." Mark's arms fell to his sides. His heart raced. The last time he talked to his dad, they fought about Mark's choice to skip a family event. The next day, his dad was gone. He had been feeling guilty about it for years, but he had never told anyone. Theresa said softly, "He says you need to stop punishing yourself.
He knows you cared about him.
He says you were his pride, even if he didn't say it enough." Mark's throat got tight. His doubt was fighting to stay alive, but something inside him was breaking. Theresa smiled softly. "He's showing me a watch, a silver watch. Do you have that?" Mark's eyes got bigger. His father's old silver pocket watch, which had been in the family for 3 generations, was still in the drawer of his nightstand since the funeral. "Yes," Mark said in a whisper that was hard to hear. "He says that every time you see that watch, you remember the time you lost. He wants you to think about the time you had. And he wants me to talk about the fishing trips?" Mark's breath stopped. His dad would take him fishing every summer when he was a boy. They would go to a quiet lake early in the morning. It was their thing. But as an adult, Mark was too busy and always said, "Next year." Theresa's voice got even softer. "He has a small tackle box in his hand and says he kept it in the garage. He wants you to know that he still goes fishing with you in his mind. You just don't see him." Mark lost it at that point. His eyes filled with tears, and they ran down his face. He wasn't thinking about logic or explanations for the first time in years. He was remembering how his dad laughed, how he whistled while fishing, and how the coffee smelled in the thermos they shared on those quiet mornings. Theresa reached out and lightly touched his hand. "He's telling his son to stop feeling guilty." "We're good," he says, and then he steps back with the biggest smile. Mark couldn't say anything. He just nodded and wiped his eyes. Emily, who was sitting next to him, squeezed his arm and started to cry. The rest of the event went on, but Mark felt like the world had changed. He was quiet for a long time on the way home, staring out the window. Finally, he said, I don't know how she knew all that. But maybe I was wrong. Emily smiled even though she was crying. Or maybe you've just been given the gift of hearing what you needed most. Mark took the silver pocket watch out of his drawer that night and put it on his desk so he could see it every day. And the next weekend, he went fishing by himself, but not really. Mark wasn't just a believer from that day on. He always had his father's love with him, no matter where he went. But it was a cool fall afternoon in Long Island. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and the leaves painted the sidewalks in shades of red and gold. Theresa Caputo had just finished reading to a small group at a community center when she saw a man standing at the back of the room. He wasn't smiling, clapping, or even looking at anyone. He stood there with his arms crossed over his chest, and his face was stern and unreadable. She had seen that look 1,000 times before, the look of someone who didn't want to be there but was dragged there by a spouse, sibling, or friend. This man looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. Theresa walked up to him after the group broke up. "Hi there, I'm Theresa," she said with her usual warm smile. "You stayed until the end, so I'm guessing you might have something on your mind?" The man let out a sigh. "Not really. My sister told me to come. I don't believe in any of this talking to spirits." His voice was deep, steady, and almost defensive. Theresa tilted her head a little. "That's fine. You don't have to have faith. But there are times when the spirits don't care what we think." The man laughed for a short time. "Yes, I'm sure." But Theresa's mind was already moving on. She felt the familiar pressure in her chest and the unmistakable energy that told her someone was trying to get through. It was sudden, strong, and persistent. I don't want to be strange, but," she said. He cut her off with a smirk and said, "Too late." She didn't pay attention to the jab. "I'm getting a young male energy. He's telling me he died suddenly, and, oh boy, he's saying dad. He keeps saying dad." The man stopped smirking right away. His jaw got tight. "Don't," he said. "Don't do that." Theresa moved a little closer and spoke more softly. "I'm not doing anything. He's the one who is contacting me. He is showing me a baseball cap that is turned backwards. He says you used to make fun of him for looking like a wannabe rapper. Do you know what that means?" The man's eyes darted away and blinked quickly. He said quietly, "That was my son.
Ethan.
2 years ago, he died in a car crash." Theresa nodded slowly. "He says you've been blaming yourself and thinking that if you had stopped him from going out that night, things would be different." She paused to listen. "But he's telling his dad, it wasn't your fault. Please listen to me, it wasn't your fault." The man's hands were shaking, and his arms were slowly falling to his sides. "I never told anyone that. Not even my sister." Theresa smiled faintly. "You didn't need to tell me," Ethan said. "And he says that you have kept his room just the way it was. You sit in there sometimes when it's dark. He always sits with you." The man had a tear running down his face. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because," Theresa said, "he's showing me the old alarm clock on his nightstand. You haven't touched it yet. He says you talk to him every time you wind it up. He hears everything you say." The man's shoulders were shaking by now. The walls he had worked so hard on for 2 years were falling down. He whispered, "I thought I was just talking to myself." Theresa's voice was steady, but it was full of love. "You weren't. He hears you. He says, 'Tell Dad I love him,' but he needs to get back to living. He can't stay in my room forever." The man let out a shaky breath that sounded like a laugh and a cry at the same time. "That's what he would say." Theresa put a hand on his arm. "Ethan is showing me you two at a baseball game. He says it was just you and him. He is throwing a ball in the air right now. He says, 'Dad, take my glove next time you go.' I'll be there." The man nodded and swallowed hard. "I haven't been to a game since he passed away. I couldn't." "Well," Theresa said softly, "maybe you can now. Not for you, but for him." For a moment, They stood there in silence, and the noise of the other people in the center faded into the background. The man finally looked her in the eyes, and for the first time since she saw him, there was no doubt in her mind, only gratitude and a hint of peace. He said, "I didn't believe any of this," and his voice broke. "But now, I don't know. I just feel like I saw him again, even if it was only for a second." She smiled. She said, "That's how love is. It doesn't stop when the body dies." And sometimes we just need to be reminded that the people we care about are closer than we think. As he walked away to meet his sister, the man looked back at Theresa and gave her a small nod. It was the kind of nod that said thank you in a way that words couldn't. She watched him leave, knowing she had done exactly what she was supposed to do that day, not convince him to believe, but show him love from the other side. Hello, lovely viewers. Welcome to my channel. I'm Mina, and I hope your day is going well. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you appreciate the video.